Well, thank you very much, Governor Bryant, and I wanted to let you know, Governor, that you mentioned the Mississippi Military Family Relief Fund, which you can find easily by Googling it online. You know, many of these families have struggled. It's not easy to get through being deployed, and this fund helps deal with that. And ladies and gentlemen, in honor of our next speaker and in honor of those who have served, we are today at MEC making a $2,500 donation to the Mississippi Family Relief Fund, Mississippi Military Family Relief Fund, and we urge all of you to find a way to give deeply and do that as well. So thank you very much. He is a soldier's general and served on active duty in Operation Desert Shield and Storm and commanded the 155th Armored Brigade Combat Team during combat operations in Operation Iraqi Freedom from 2004 to 2006. I had the privilege of attending that deployment at Camp Shelby as the guest of John McCulloch, who was there also with his son, who is a major in the Guard. And ladies and gentlemen, it was a very moving experience to see these hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of troops being prepared to go into harm's way. This general, at the time a colonel, led those forces. He graduated last year from MEC's Leadership Mississippi program. And that's where I first heard him speak of his experiences in serving our nation at the front line. But after you hear him today, I think you will agree that it is not he who learned from our leadership program. It is we who learned about leadership from him. He speaks today representing all of our Mississippi heroes who have served in military service and stepped in harm's way to protect our freedom. Please join me in welcoming Adjutant General Augustus Leon Collins.
Thank you. Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you, Mr. Wilson, for that introduction, to Governor Bryant, to Lieutenant Governor Reeves, Mr. Host, to the members of the Mississippi Economic Council. Ladies and gentlemen, what an honor it is for me to stand before you today as we honor the men and women who have worn the uniforms of our military services. To those of you who are serving, to those of you who have served in the past, let me say thank you for your service to our country. Thank you for the sacrifices that you had to make over the years. Thank you for your commitment to the missions that were handed down to you by your military services. And thank you for your devotion to duty. It's because of you and many others just like you that we have the opportunity to live, to work, and to play in the greatest country on the face of this earth, the United States of America. I can assure you that your service is not forgotten, and I can assure you that it is very appreciated by the men and women of this country. All of you know that we have been a nation that's been in constant conflict for the past decade or so. Fortunately for us, I need to get a little closer. Fortunately for us, we're about to be ripped shed of those conflicts. The war in Iraq is over. The war in Afghanistan is starting to wind down, but that's because of men and women who wear the uniforms, men and women who have fought on our front lines, men and women who have supported them with logistical support. That's the reason that we are able to bring these two conflicts to an end. Today, more than 900 soldiers and airmen of the Mississippi Army and Air National Guard are mobilized and deployed in 9 different countries around the globe. Another 700 of those are scheduled in some form of an alert status right now, waiting to see if they're going to be called forward to go in places like Afghanistan or Kuwait. More than 60,000 of our brothers and sisters are actually deployed in the combat zones of Afghanistan today. They're placing themselves in harm's way to make sure that you and I remain safe in this country. Now, I know some of you probably read or in the paper this morning, or you probably saw in the news last night, that we had an incident at the 172nd Air Wing yesterday here in Jackson. What we had was what we thought was a potential active shooter incident. As it turns out, it was a dry run. No one was injured. But I would be remiss if I didn't publicly thank all of our local, state, and national law enforcement agencies and first responders who reacted to that potential crisis yesterday. It's just a testament to the great working relationship that we have among all of our law enforcement agencies here in the state of Mississippi. But there's another group of individuals that I'd like to also recognize, a group that I think was probably lost somewhere in the fray yesterday. A small group of security police from 172nd Air Wing, men and women in uniform. They were the first to respond. They were the first on the scene. And when the situation escalated, they took appropriate action, locked down the base, secured the situation, and took charge. In fact, what I'd like to say they did was they ran to the sound of the guns. Now, running to the sound of the guns is nothing new for Mississippians in uniform. Let me take you back to February 23rd, 1847. It was the Mexican-American War. The general on the battlefield that day was a man by the name of General Zachary Taylor. And he was commanding a force of about 5,000 soldiers. Opposing him that day was the general of the Mexican Army, a man by the name of Santa Anna, who had a force about 3 times the size of what General Taylor had. Now, knowing that he was greatly outnumbered, General Taylor decided to take up a defensive position in a mountain pass by the Hacienda Buena Vista. Santa Anna, understanding that he had the superiority of numbers, decided that he would make a quick attack, sensing he might be able to achieve a quick victory. He gave the order for an outright assault on the American position. By midday, he had broken the lines of the American forces. That's when General Taylor called to the battlefield the 1st Mississippi Regiment, a regiment that had primarily been used up until that point as reserves and guard duty. But on that day, they threw themselves into the breach. And at the point when the Mexican Army was about to overrun them, the commander of that unit, the 1st Mississippi Regiment, also known as the Mississippi Rifles, their commander, a man by the name of Jefferson Davis, gave the command to stand fast, Mississippians. They did. They held the line, they won the day, they drove Santa Anna from the battlefield that day. We won the Battle of Buena Vista and turned the tide on the Mexican-American War. Now, the lineage of that unit is still alive and well here in Mississippi in the form of the 155th Brigade Combat Team, the modern-day Mississippi Rifles, the same unit that I had the honor to command from 2004 to 2006, the same unit that deployed in 2005 to the Iraqi theater of operation, that same unit that distinguished themselves in combat against al-Qaeda in Iraq. And I can tell you that the same zeal and bravery that was displayed in 1847 was displayed time and time again in 2005. I witnessed acts of bravery and sacrifice that will rival any that our country has to offer. I'll offer to you one such act of bravery and sacrifice today. If you'll travel back with me to March the 2nd, 2005. Now, it was a day that was probably not unlike the day before or the day after for most of the citizens in the country of Iraq. But for a platoon from headquarters and headquarters company, 1st Battalion 155th Infantry, it was a day that would change their lives forever. They were given the task of escorting a civil affairs team to go and take a look, do a survey of a road that had been constantly bombed by roadside bombs, improvised explosive devices. They were traveling in an area where the 2 provinces of Babel and Al-Anbar come together, an area that is commonly known as the Triangle of Death. An explosion occurred, an explosion that caused great damage to the side of one of the up-armored Humvees that they were traveling in. Now, that's usually not a problem because those up-armored Humvees were built to withstand a blast that comes in from the side. The problem that day is that the crew had already dismounted. Standing between that blast and that Humvee was the platoon sergeant, Sergeant First Class Ellis Ray Martin. Sergeant Martin was severely injured. The call went out for a medic. Now, in the Army, a medic back then was known as a 91 Whiskey. And it's the medic's job to make sure that the soldiers who are injured on the battlefield receive proper care to where he can build a bridge of care that takes them from the point on the battlefield to a place in the rear where they can get more definitive medical care. The medic on the field that day was a young specialist by the name of Robert Shane Pugh. Sergeant Pugh's, Specialist Pugh's duty that day was to make sure that Sergeant Martin did not die from his wounds. He was successful. Even though Sergeant Martin had numerous surgeries and in fact had to receive more than 60 units of blood before we could even get him out of Iraq, I'm proud to report to you that he's alive and well today. Now that's a great story. The problem though was also standing between that blast and the Humvee was the medic, Robert Shane Pugh, also severely injured. And no doubt because of his medical training, he understood the severity of his wounds. But while he lay on the ground trying to hold on to life itself, he gave specific instructions to his fellow soldiers on how to take care of Sergeant Martin, to make sure that they stabilized him to where he could get from that point on the battlefield back to the point in the rear where he could get that more definitive medical care. You see, on that day, Specialist Pugh disregarded his own life to make sure that the life of Sergeant Martin was saved. Greater love has no man except he that lays down his life for another. Now, since the birth of our country, our military ranks have been full of men and women just like Specialist Pugh. Men and women who place themselves between the enemy and their things that they think in life have value, things like their family, their friends, their loved ones, their fellow soldiers, and even this country that we live in. So you might ask, why do they do it? Well, I'll tell you why. They do it because they said they would. There was a day when they all raised their right hand and they signed their name and they made a promise before God and in the presence of man that they would protect and defend this great country of ours. They do it because they're going to make good on that promise, even if it means that they have to run to the sound of the guns. Experts tell us that there are more than 300 million people who live in this country of ours, but they also tell us that less than 1% of those serve in our Army, our Navy, our Air Force, and our Marine Corps, or the Coast Guard. It's that less than 1% that keeps us all safe every day. It's that less than 1% who, if they need to, will run to the sound of the guns. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for being here to honor all of our men and women who serve in our Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, and Coast Guard. All of those men and women that you see here in uniform, all of those who have served in the past. I thank God for my health and strength. I thank Him for His grace and His mercy. But I thank Him for these men and women who have served our country, and especially those who find themselves in harm's way in places like Afghanistan and Kuwait today. I ask that you will continue to pray for them as well as their family. And I ask that God will continue to bless you, and may God continue to bless the United States of America. Thank you.